Okay, welcome back to my Carnivore and Beyond podcast. It's a while since I did one of these, and I'm really delighted to be coming back with a friend of mine, Jason Klepko. And really, I don't know how to introduce Jason, because I've seen him so active on my 100% Carnivore group, my Beyond the Beyond group, on his page on Facebook, and we've chatted a lot privately. We've never met before, like even over video, but over Skype, but we've chatted, privately, and his writings always amaze me. He has an insight into life that just never ceases to blow me away. I love his posts. They're always about 5,000 words long. And he keeps interest. And this is what I do. I look at my groups for people who figured out the bullshit in everything from diet to spirituality, and Jason has seen through a hell of a lot of these illusions. So I'm really delighted to be chatting with him. I have no plans for this chat. I've got no questions written down. Jason's a very spontaneous dude. I know that. I can tell by his writing. And so I just thought we'd let it go. So welcome, Jason. It's a pleasure to have you on here.
It's a pleasure to finally be talking to you face to face, at least on Skype. And I appreciate the introduction. It was very kind of you.
Oh, it's well deserved, man. It's well deserved. You've entertained me massively.
Yeah, no, the feeling is mutual. The feeling is definitely mutual. I remember the first video I saw of you sitting in your garden, casually just chatting about life. And I thought, man, this guy's a guru. Where does he get it? But
we're all gurus.
I think you hit a nail on the head, though. There's I do have kind of a gift of seeing things, or maybe just perspective, putting things in a way I think a lot of times other people are thinking, what I'm writing, or it's the thing they can't quite put their finger on. But then I realized a lot of times with people's responses or reactions, hey, this is really how they were feeling. And somehow or another, I'm able to put it into words, and I consider it a gift. But in all humility, I have to admit a lot of that gift comes from the fact that I've made so many mistakes in my own life. I'm adept at learning things the hard way. But when I learn a life lesson, it sinks pretty deep and I carry it forward. I give you a little anecdote. It kind of describes me pretty well. I peed on an electric fence twice. One time would probably have been enough for most people. I was a young kid. My friends kind of put me up to it, and I just kept thinking, yeah, there's no way I pee on that electric fence and it's going to shock me, right? It didn't compute. I thought there's no way that's going to happen. And I mean, it shocked the life out of me. Later on in the same day, after we did our fishing and hanging out with my friends, I was walking back home near the same little horse farm that had the electric fence. And in my head, I kept questioning myself. Maybe that was just a fluke, a 1 in a million thing. Well, I tried again and the result was very similar. And I can tell you with confidence that that was over 30 years ago and there has never been a third try. I am the idiot that second guessed it, really that can't be right. And so I'm guilty of many times in my life. Man, I don't learn the first time. Sometimes don't even learn the second time. But once it sinks in, it's kind of a funny little story, but it describes how I feel about a lot of things spiritually, diet, my little quest to become a better iteration of me. Um, you know, you learn lessons, and I don't ever get this feeling that I'm better than others, for example. Occasionally, I can tell, but I also can tell, other people are on their own journey too. Uh, they may not be better than me today, but they might be someday. Everyone has that potential to just keep growing and changing and improving. Um, if I'm honest with myself and I'm being authentic, if I have anything that could be called a gift or a talent, like my ability to reach people or to identify with people, there is a gift. I believe those gifts come from God, but it's also up to us to nurture those gifts, you know. And when I take a deep look at how did I develop those gifts, well, a lot of it comes from making the wrong choices or traveling down the wrong paths. And I believe a person can learn a lot in life doing things the right way and making the right choices. I think people put too much emphasis on the idea of how much we learn from our mistakes. Well, yep, I've learned some powerful lessons from mistakes. Um, it's ultimately all paths will lead you to a greater truth if you choose to learn from your mistakes. If you choose to grow, let it go um, when it's bogging you down. Things like guilt or shame or regret. It's one of my best methods of learning, I suppose. But on the one hand, these are all protective instincts: shame, regret, guilt, embarrassment. They'll teach you a lesson, protective instincts. Don't do that again. What I had struggles with for much of my life was carrying those feelings, carrying them heavy for too long. That's the thing, is these things are a positive in life, teach you a little lesson, get back on the wagon or whatever. But the issue that I feel like I had for so long in life is that I carried them to the point, shame or guilt, to the point that they would weigh me down, keep me from moving forward, tell myself I don't deserve something better, or very negative. And I just finally hit a certain spot in life where, I should feel bad when I've done something wrong. I'm not going to throw that away, but um, I'm human, I make mistakes just like everyone else. And it was the more and more I tried to learn how to forgive others and try to look at them as only human, that I really began to learn more about myself. It's something a little joke I like to make is about hugs. So much of life can be described with this analogy. If you badly want a hug, the best way to get one is to give one away. Mutual benefit. But that goes for all of the things that a person might be missing in life. If I need a little bit of forgiveness, I've got to be more generous in giving it. If I want somebody's compassion, I have to be more generous in giving compassion. And at the same time, I say these things or I write these things that I know, Phil, I know this is truth that I'm speaking. This is a better way of living that I'm describing. But I also frequently tell people in my writings, I do a lot of self-deprecating type writings, a lot of humbling, like, man, I am a train wreck sort of writings. I say these things openly and willingly to people. Just because I know the right path doesn't change the fact that I'm human. And this is not necessarily who I am. This is who I want to be. If I screw it up today, I can't let that stop me trying again tomorrow. So I think that's kind of a little bit of background on my personal philosophies. Um, I've
That's
learned a
beautiful,
lot.
man.
What's
That's
that?
beautiful. There's so much in there that
Yeah,
that was great. You launched into it, and there's so much in there that I could ask and comment on. About 500 questions came up, and I've forgotten all of them. But I mean, one thing that comes through is the humility in your writing, and and what's similar to me, I think, is what complete idiots we've been in the past and how you learn from that. You know,
yeah,
I don't think, you know, actually, that we've been any more idiotic than anybody else. It's just that we've come to a place where we've decided that it's okay to admit to being an idiot. And,
yeah,
and then you can see that same idiocy in other people, and you become able to help them through that kind of thing. Now, when you mentioned something about how the writings are kind of spontaneous, and this is something that happens to me. If I like that post that I put up the other day about the eat meat, eat fatty meat, get sunshine, protect the NHS thing, you know, it
yeah.
just
That's
came to
good.
me, and
Yeah,
I can't. For about a week, I've been thinking it's about time I do a video. I got no inspiration. I got no. But when it comes, it's like it's not you, is it? It kind of comes through you,
it really does.
like the musicians explain the best songs that come through. They just kind of come through you, and I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep because it was there. You know, where the whole week I've
Yeah,
been panicking about doing a video. Thought, oh, it's been ages. But you can't do that. I can't do that anyway. Some people can do it every day, like Sean Baker or something. But I can't do it.
yeah,
I have to have inspiration, and that's the thing. It's a sort of, it's an admitting that you're an idiot, but also having the relaxation to think, what's going to have to come through me, what's going to come through me is just going to have to wait. It's just, you're just going to have to wait and let it happen, you know, and chill out and not panic. And
yeah.
that's what I feel about your writings, that they seem to come from a real flow state, you know. That's what I love about it
Yeah.
anyway. So cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah. I feel the same for sure. Like I I have a book I've been writing, and I learned a long time ago that if I force it, I'm not as happy with the results. Like sometimes, that inspiration hits, and that's one of the sources of my own humility. Um, like full disclosure, I can be kind of an arrogant ass sometimes. I can, working on it. But when someone gives me feedback and tells me how profoundly my writing has touched them, um, I always beg the question, how much of that is really me? Because the things that I write on largely are philosophical in nature. They're or spiritual. They're Yeah, I dig into the science some, but I really defer to the guys like you mentioned, like Sean Baker. I much rather hear what he has to say on certain things than what I have to say, but I can always add a little something to that. So when I've reached somebody in this way, I think, man, that perhaps that's more of a spiritual connection. Like, you're picking up what I'm putting down. You're smelling what I'm stepping in, right? We're on the same page, and to me, I think that more describes a component of the spirit. Like there's so many things about the spiritual realm, if you will, you just can't put into words. um I have a theory about that. There is a physical world. It's measurable, it's tangible, tactile. We can put our hands on it, we can experience it with our five senses. And then there's the metaphysical world that is spiritual. And just by the very definition of what is metaphysical, is not something I can't prove to you. For example, I have a spirit. But if you and I are having a deep conversation and we're feeling nearly transcendent, like you'll feel that moment where, like, yeah, you get it. And then I get it. And then we can't quite put our finger on it, can't quite, the next words just don't happen. Well, that's because it's a feeling. That's that's where the spiritual world, the metaphysical, the supernatural, that's where all that falls. You can't quite put your finger on it. And because I'm in my writings, and sometimes if I'm speaking, if I'm in the zone, um, if I realize in humility at that moment, yeah, if someone's getting inspired by something I'm saying or something that I'm sharing, then that's a gift. I feel like in those moments, sort of like you described, I'm a conduit. I'm more of a I'm in my own personal religious beliefs. I would think that those are the moments when I'm an instrument of God. Like I'm not. This is. I can certainly be grateful. I can have a little teeny weeny bit of pride. Like I did nurture and develop the skill. I do embrace it. I share it generously. But there's also the humbling element. Like what a pleasure it is, what a gift it is to be able to share something with someone that moves them, that inspires them. And I know you feel the same way as a musician and the other. I play a mean harmonica, right? Sometimes people, when they hear it, it'll blow their mind. I really am pretty good, but to see their reaction, like they're really feeling the jam. They're just in the moment. Yeah, there's room for a little pride there. It's a skill you developed. You worked hard at it, but there's a little humbling element. Holy smoke, what a gift that I'm able to uplift people. I'm able to give them a little moment. And I think you have those moments all the time, Phil, where you are in that zone. Where does that inspiration quite come from? Um, I've learned enough about the human brain. Like some of it can be described like why, where it comes from in a PET scan or whatever, what part of the brain is actually lighting up. But I'm sorry, there's still that element that just doesn't quite describe or put into words or on a chart or on a scan. They doesn't quite describe the feeling. But that's kind of where you reach people, is that feeling. Is and you kind of alluded to it earlier, the I've been there. I see you do this all the time in speaking to vegans. I know you can be harsh, but I also know what you're fighting when when you're facing them. But what about that person who is broken and they know it and they're sick? And well, when you approach them with humility, yeah, I know what that feeling is. I was dedicated to this lifestyle, to this diet, and it was destroying me. Well, it's a lot harder to reach them shaking the finger at them and calling them a moron for being a vegan versus, you know, or you could put it this way, hey, I was an idiot too. um, I, but then you share your path, your journey. A lot of times we don't want someone who is the ideal telling us what to do. I want that flawed human being that kind of walked the path and I want to see their results that tells me maybe I can do it too. And that whole journey of humility, man, that's not easy. When I see other people who have done it, and I've seen it with you, I've seen it like from when I first ever saw a video of you, and then in your writings, I've seen a bit of evolution in you too. Like there's this humility point that where you really change, and I feel like you level up spiritually when you realize, man, I just I would rather care about these people than criticize these people. It doesn't stop me from being human from time to time and ripping them a new one, but there's
There's
I think when you get into that level of transcendence where, man, this really isn't about me. I can have my me moments, but it's about helping others who are struggling like I was. There's that's an act of charity. It's a good feeling to touch somebody. And I think that actual moment, why it always boils down to folks like us for um the inspiration has to be there, or it really is a struggle. I can force it, but it's not quite the same as like when that light clicks, that you just get that feeling even in your gut. In kind of those moments, like you're having real connection with people. It's
I think you've made an amazing point here about being teachers even when you're kind of broken still and you're on your journey, because I think there's a great expression flying around that the next Buddha is the Sangha. The next Buddha is going to be the crowd. It's just going to be everybody. And this is so important because you get this ridiculous thing that's come up with science. If you ask a scientist or you're a doctor those are the people that you listen to and nobody else. There's like all the idiots and then a few scientists. And as we know, that is not the scientific method. It's always ready to be wrong and it's always growing. So if you're one of these people who goes, the science is settled, listen to scientists, this is bullshit. But what you often need is the person on the next rung of the ladder, not 100 rungs up. Presuming a scientist or a doctor is even 100 rungs up, they're not. They're usually on the wrong ladder. But but you want somebody who's just a bit ahead of you, because then you can relate to them, then you can understand them. This is what's so important. I mean, this is what I do with people in consultations. I'm no genius or whatever, but I've been through this autoimmunity. So somebody who comes to me with autoimmunity, yes, I've learned a whole load more and I've been through it and I can tell them about it. But then if they want absolutely to know exactly all their blood results and all the science around it, I can refer them to somebody else, because I'm never going to know shit about stuff like that, I just go by the intuition, but I can lead them to I know the people who know about that. And then you can have the humility also to say, I don't know, and send them on to somebody else, because it's all the Sangha. It's the crowd teaching the crowd. It's the universe teaching the universe. And like you say, we have our me moments, but we also need to have our universe moments.
Oh yeah. Oh no, the me moments are important. I've had this deep dive personally, like big rabbit hole. There's this people overdo the self-help thing. Self-care and self this and self-healing and protect myself and all this, and you see the necessity of that, because you see how broken people get when they're not taking care of themselves. But I see some people getting so bogged down. I'm guilty of having done it myself in the self journey, right? That you forget that you're surrounded by everybody else too. But I think you're onto something there. Where above anything, we are a social species. And like, what is it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like social acceptance. I forget it. I should have printed it up but then there's the social relation to other people. And then just above that, at the very highest, is self-actualization. So the social component of who we are seems to be somewhat universally accepted as a more critical, like closer to our survival. You got food, water, shelter, and then the basic things, then social, then self. And like, self-actualization being the highest. Well, if you do back up and say, well, to get to self-actualization, I do have to be a social being. And there's so much truth in what you're saying. Like, I run into it all the time. Like, I run into somebody who's so much better than me or more gifted than me in this certain area. Well, let's talk ego for a second. If I'm willing to learn from you, and learn what you know, Well, then I'm going to have all those things I know too, and eventually maybe I'm better than you, huh? Well, but that's the thing is, the more you're willing to learn from others and share this whole life experience, man, that next profound thing you hear, man, it might not come from the television. It might not come from this New York Times best-selling book that you read. It could come from some homeless guy on the side of the street. And but you'd be shocked to know what that guy has figured out about life, probably doing things the wrong way. There's a whole world of people you can learn from, you know. And I think you're absolutely right. People are often searching for that person who has all the answers. Um, I think if there was some way that you could get some of the answers from everybody on the planet, you'd be a lot closer to all the answers than you would be ever asking just one or two people. You know, I think that's a fascinating idea. I like that you put that in my space. The next Buddha is
Well,
gonna be
that's
everybody.
another thing of that is that, you know, we're not individuals. We're sort of sense organs of the infinite. It's another expression I love, but it just means that you know, you're never going to know everything unless you're all those sense organs at once. You know, the eye is not the liver, and you've got to be sort of content to be the eye, but just to be the part of the whole as well, and you can get a sense of it. I mean,
Oh yeah.
how did this is usually what I start with, but it's great we've gone around it this way. I mean, at this point, how did this come about for you? I mean, what have you been through? Where did you come up through childhood? Did you have these things back then? Did you go through any standard or organized spiritual discipline, or did you how did you come to this version of Jason now?
Oh well. I mean, obviously we're all the sum of all our parts. And as I was looking forward to our chat this week, I put a lot of thought into that. Um, I still have some memories from when I was a very young child, like even as young as 3 years old. Don't know how, because all of a sudden there's times I can't remember what I had for breakfast. But I was always that kid that would say things, and adults would look at this kid and think, "My gosh, that just came out of this kid's mouth." Um, I always had a degree of, I guess, profound perspective. And then now I did grow up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Mormon faith. Um, I don't behave as such, but I still believe strongly in the church. Well, for most Mormons in high school age, like from ninth grade through 12th grade, we attend a seminary uh, every day before school throughout my whole high school. I would go to church first for about an hour and study the scriptures. So I did spend a whole year studying the Old Testament and then a whole year studying the New Testament. And um, so I was definitely exposed to a lot of spiritual ideas. They're definitely deeply Christian ideas. Um, I had my rebellious phase. I've probably had a lot of those. But what's interesting, I hate that it seems like the story of my life, but a lot of the things that I learned when I was in my youth sunk in as I got older, and I was doing things the wrong way, and I was making the wrong choices, and I kept coming to these conclusions, just observing things in life. You know, there's a lot of truth in those things I learned when I was younger. Um, even interesting, really interesting things. I went back to college in my 30s. Um, and studied psychology, and I kept learning things in psychology. Well, when you study so hard in religion and spirituality first, and then I went and I'm learning things in psychology, like social reactance theory was one that just sunk in with me. It's just a good example. Well, social reactance theory, I guess a good way of describing it is like this: it's teenager syndrome. Like, I can tell you something that's going to help you and benefit you, and a teenager is going to do the opposite and even hurt themselves just to defy what you've done. And then you come to the conclusion, well, what is the answer? Look, if you were to refer to the New Testament, like you would, for example, conclude, well, because you can't force somebody. What you have to do is lead by example. I'm trying to be better at that in my life these days, trying to be more authentic. You can lead by example, and then you can love them and forgive them. If you try to force somebody, people don't respond well to force. If you're really harsh on somebody for doing something wrong, you just beat the snot out of it. What you've done is push them away. But you have to leave the door open for somebody. And I mean, I started watching or learning these things in psychology and at a university, and I'm thinking, it's funny. Um, Philosophically, this information has been around for a very long time. And now scientists will suddenly put their new jargon and terminology to it. And it makes sense, and it's beautiful how they, in behaviorism and all, they can make sense of it scientifically, but how are they ignoring the fact that, hey, you might understand the mechanisms now that contribute to that, but the philosophy, the solution has actually been there a long time. So it was good to have that foundation when I was young, because then, like you've alluded to, then the science jumps in there and it pretends that the spiritual element is irrelevant. Well, I'm sorry, how is it that science keeps coming up with these conclusions that it feels like I already had answers to? Well, so far in my long journey down the rabbit hole of self-improvement and change and all that, I'm not angry at science. There's some things I'm angry about, but it doesn't seem to have all of the answers, and a lot of the mainstream answers, especially during this whole COVID crisis, they seem incorrect. There's this science thing that you really have to place a lot of faith in, but I've seen criticisms in my whole life for spiritual or religious people putting faith in God or putting faith in their spirituality. Well, wait a minute. When I look over here on this hand at so many things I learned in science, um, it's quite a few leaps of faith to come to these certain conclusions. I mean, people confuse science with math. Math, 1 + 1 will always be 2. Science, well, the scientific method's a beautiful thing if it's actually applied. You don't get a lot of facts out of science. I mean, well, that's a stretch. Science can help you with some facts, but what you get is an ongoing solution with the scientific method. The whole reason it was dreamed up the way that it was is so that you're not ever, until you're absolutely certain of an answer, which then becomes scientific law, there's still room for more knowledge. There's still room for growth. And just like you said, every time someone says the science on this is settled, I think, wait, so you've just built a giant wall saying we'll never know more about this than we know now. I'm sorry, but that doesn't jive with any sense of my personal belief. So my spiritual side, um, it's always been there, but it was the deeper that I dug into psychology and behaviorism. I've trained dogs and horses. I'm very good at it. Some of that is to do with humility too. This dog's not a person, it's a dog. What is this dog expecting of me? You know, you learn about pack mentality. When you're training horses, you learn about herd mentality. You learn how do they respond, like body language, this, that, and the other. Then, well, I can learn how to apply the same sort of thing to my life as a human by saying, well, that dog is only a dog. What am I expecting out of this dog? Um, I need to appreciate it and love it as it is. Then, on the other hand, for me as a human or a fellow human, humans are pretty fantastic, right? I mean, we're we're an amazing species. Even if what I believe spiritually and in God is not true, um, what if I die tomorrow and that's it? The lights are out, no more Jason forever. You know, in that moment, I could still, if I had the moment and saw it coming, I would still have been grateful to be a human. We're an amazing thing. But I still have to always remember, as great as that is, I am only human. Nothing more, certainly nothing less. But because my spiritual foundation was probably my earliest, as life has gone on, especially years of dealing with anxiety and depression and some really challenging mental health concerns, uh, as I explore the science, I also understand the spiritual component. You know, it's always underlying with me. I'm such a stubborn, um, pig-headed person. If I hadn't had the spirituality first, or if so much of it at a young age, I dread to think how hard it would have been for a guy like me to find that later. You know what I mean? Um, but I guess kind of in summary, man, I've had some experiences life that just shook me, rocked me to my core. I had a near death experience. It it taught me what was important. It was a huge, huge change. Um, and I can tell you what I thought of in those last moments as the lights were going out, and I kind of realized this might be it. This might be all of it. Very spiritual level, like I felt the presence of family members, you know, that I had lost. I couldn't see them. And it's weird in that kind of transcendent moment. I don't remember the exact words in the conversations, like, but I can describe the sentiment, the emotion of it. Is I had this moment where it was complete surrender. I told God, like, I believe you're there. I mean, but I also acutely aware of the difference between a belief and a certainty. I believe in God, but I can't even absolutely prove him to myself. So as my lights were going out, I told God, I said, you know, I believe you're there, and I'm glad you're here, but just in case, if these are my last minutes in existence, I'm going to spend these moments thinking about people I love. That's it. If just in case this is all there is, um, and at that time in my life, I strongly felt that my life had been a lot more garbage and crap than it had been rewarding. But I was still grateful for every minute of it. And I hit that moment where I didn't care. I was letting go. And right at that moment where I where I acknowledged God. For some reason, the pain that I was experiencing at the time, the physical pain, the emotion, it was still there, but it didn't matter for some odd reason. I was still in a lot of pain. I was more than likely dying in that moment, but I let it. I was able to let that go, and it was weird because it feels like my little prayer, if it was answered, because I was content to enjoy thoughts of my mom and dad and my brothers and nieces and nephews and just like and friends. Like it was all these people I was thinking about. And I was sad for them, like, oh, they're gonna miss me. But it felt good knowing I'd be missed, you know. But I was content with the idea that, man, this all in all, man, it's been a good life. Well, the lights sort of went out. And then the next thing I saw that I remembered anyway was bright lights in an emergency room. Well, I processed that. Took a lot of years, actually. I had huge questions in the beginning, like, oh my gosh, like while I'm sitting there checking out, I told God I wasn't sure if he was real. I challenged myself over that over and over again. Well, I was talking to him. I was showing him I had faith in him. And you know what? If you have to kind of put yourself in a perspective, perhaps an omnipotent being, he knows that I don't know for sure that he's there. He knows that it's just my faith, just my belief. He knows. But I thought, well, if you want to question my faith, who did I talk to when it came down to the nuts and bolts? Like, I did. I went to him, and then my personal feeling is like this life is a gift. Your loved ones are among your greatest gifts that you are given. The fact that my gratitude for life was absolute at that moment, in spite of all the rough times and difficulties, and my gratitude was there, and my love for the people that I love was there. So I did. I sorted through a little of that experience, wondering, is this did I commit blasphemy while I was dying? Because I told God, I, and it wasn't in so many words exactly. I'm expressing feelings. I'm trying to put the feelings I had into words that I was willing to let him go, but it was not in that kind of weird moment. Your brain was shutting down. Like, it wasn't much I could focus on. So what energy I had, I just wanted to focus on the things that were most important to me. And I feel like, to my heavenly Father, to God, that if I turned my heart at that in that moment to the gifts that he gave me, and to gratitude for the life, gratitude for people that mattered to me, I think I hit the nail on the head. I challenged it, went over and over again. I, it's funny is that you could understand this. A lot of people may not, but I know you'll know exactly what I mean. Like when I'm writing, every bit of this, every one of these experiences, they don't always think of them particularly, but that's a part of my personal paradigm that impacts everything that comes out of my face. Um, and that was a huge, huge dose of humility. And the toughest thing is you think, wow, I've had this great spiritual awakening. Boy, I'm transcending this whole business of now I keep making mistakes, but the point of it is to keep correcting those mistakes. Just keep pressing forward. Um, it's a there's so many things that contributed to my spiritual view of life. Some of them for sure came from church and scripture study, and some of them came from just my love of nature and animals. You know, some of them came from very definable moments and experiences like that one, like the near death experience. It it all of it plays a part. You know, it's my understanding and belief that in this life you learn line upon line and precept upon precept. You get this knowledge I'm getting today. I don't even know what I'm going to be using it for, but 5 years, 10 years down the road, it just suddenly makes sense. Like, oh my gosh, this tool in my arsenal today, and some of that is really beautiful, Phil. Like, I I have this belief, like I know right now I haven't yet discovered my true happiness, my true calling. I know it's out there. Um, but I hit this point where I realize even the hardest and worst, just even most painful experiences that ever happened, if they taught me something, or if they sustained me, or kept my spirit strong, or took my very weak spirit and gave it a boost, you know, once you find that happiness, or you find a place of peace and contentment in life, you owe it to all your experiences, your gratitude. You owe it for the worst moment and the best moment. You know, and in that kind of train of thought, I can even be grateful to people who treated me badly. You know, um, I can resent when I treated people badly too. I can resent myself for that, because there's people I wish I had treated better. But I started learning again. Remember, I told you, if you want more forgiveness for yourself, you got to be willing to offer it. And one of the things I learned about that is that um, I'm sure there are people in my history, in my life, that have wronged me really badly. That, you know, I'd rather just forgive them and see them as human. I don't want them carrying that. I mean,
That,
if
mate,
I
that's a beautiful ability. I tell you, my missus is always going on at me about being too naive and forgiving people, and I give people way too many chances. You know, and some people in my past, I've thought were tremendous friends, and then at some point they just completely shit on you, and I just go, well, you know, it was just them. It's all right. I'll give them a hug and whatever. They quite often get cross if you give them a hug. But it's funny. But and then you mentioned that when anything that you do, or your writings or something, always contain these little components of you that you're sometimes not even aware of at the time when you're doing it. And it's funny, when you mentioned that, it reminded me of this novel I wrote. It was about 2003, and it's still there on Amazon. If anyone wants to see it, it's called An Illusion of Maya. And it's a story, it's a combination of sort of past lives, parallel lives, my journeys in India with a bipolar lady who I was going out with at the time, all sorts of things mixed in with sort of getting the major character out in the wilds at night without making him a tramp or a hobo or whatever, and making him sort of one of these people who does these long session carp fishing at these lakes, and after like one or two fish for years at a time. And
yeah,
it was just fun. It just came to me again. It was just inspiration. I couldn't stop writing at 4 o'clock in the morning.
yeah,
But the weird thing is, okay, mate, when I wrote it, maybe 30% of it was autobiographical. And now, I mean, wow, was it that long ago? It's like 17 years later. But about 80% of it is autobiographical. The things that have happened, that have come through, where was I getting this from? Was I feeling it from some kind of the fact that the timeline isn't quite straight somehow? You know, was it from some parallel lives? Was it, who knows? I don't know. But it was fascinating now to have got that into a book and actually be able to look back on it and think, wow, actually a whole load of that came true. Very strange.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. No, I like that sentiment. I've occasionally, because I do write ad nauseum, you can tell I speak like I write too. It's possible for me to talk and not shut up.
It's great. It's
I
a bit
live with
lazy
it.
one for me. I'm sitting back and enjoying this one, man. You carry
I,
on.
I, I appreciate it. Well, so my writings, like something I did 4 or 5 years ago, will pop up on Facebook, and for some odd reason, when that happens, one of my first reactions is to think, "Oh my gosh, what did I step in that time?" Like it could. Then I read it, and I'm thinking, "Holy smoke, that's truer for me right now than it was then." But the writing and being in that space, it's also like manifesting. I hear people say that all the time, manifest it, and that's how you create things. And I think there's a lot of truth in it. But you in your writings or in your art, like writing is a beautiful medium like that. It does, once you've put it to paper, you're you tend to start being more in that space. I think that's beautiful about the book you you wrote. That wow, it's more autobiographical now than it was when I wrote it. But you're also, man, you're sorting out your thoughts and beliefs. And I think sometimes to put them in the paper, put them on writing. I know it helps me tremendously. There's just sometimes I actually am writing something and I get to the end of it and reread it, and I'm telling myself, this what I wrote down is right. This is true. What I was thinking when I started this was dead wrong. I don't know how that happens in writing, that I just proved myself wrong, but I'm constantly challenging my own biases, my own. I see you do the same thing too. There's something like one of my favorite guys to watch is Jordan Peterson. You can watch that dude in mid sentence, and then his head cocks to the side. And it's like, wait a minute. He was literally just fighting, like challenging his own cognitive dissonance to find that scrap of truth that he's not quite getting. And it's like, so he's like to a thinker like me or to you, to watch him would be like a basketball guy watching, I don't know, LeBron James. It's like yeah, I'm a thinker too, but then to watch Jordan Peterson in his process, the way he speaks, like, man, that happens to me all the time in writing. I'm not writing something about what I know. I'm writing something I want to figure out. I've got to see it on paper to get those thoughts sorted.
That's beautiful. There's
And
like this. There's the expression, isn't there? We teach what we most need to learn, and we often do that. But this is what I love. I think this is why this Human Unleashed things come together with Jeremy and Ben and Graham, because we are always looking for the way forward. People say, well, you're stuck in this paradigm, you're stuck in this business of carnivore, you're stuck in... Not really. I'm always challenging what I know, and all I know is that this is the best thing I've found so far. This is something that we always say to each other, this is the best we've found so far that seems to take people from suffering to a place of far more enjoyment and
yeah,
peace
yeah.
and health. And we keep on, we're absolutely ready to say, God, we were totally wrong about that one. We were totally wrong about that one. And that's how you got to move on. I believe that is, like you say, the scientific method. And so everybody
Yeah.
accuses us of being anti-science. No, I think we're more scientific than anybody. And you too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I scientific method, I actually kind of apply toward my own personal philosophies. Like, hey, is this right? Like, the only way that this is true is if it's always true, you know? So if one of my core beliefs, if I can put it to the test on this situation or that life circumstance or this thing, and it's not true in this area, well, then this is a good core or foundational belief. Well, no, it's a good core and foundational belief if it proves to be always true. Um, if it's just kind of an idea, like a surface belief, or it just doesn't seem to apply to all cases, well, it doesn't make it a fallacy. It just makes it a potential error in logic. It just, you know, there are a few things I feel like are one shoe fits all, in philosophy. So if you compared that to science, then the one size fits all would be the equivalent of a scientific law. In philosophy, I think if there's anything that is one size fits all, then if there is such a thing philosophically, then that would be your very best core belief, like the foundation you base all your other beliefs and decisions on. And
Absolutely.
I
The
think,
one for me with that is I think it was summed up quite nicely by an old story. I forget who it was. One of the sort of non-dual type gurus, and one of his disciples or whatever had these extraordinary experiences, and he was there sort of playing with Krishna, and everything was going on, meeting all these gods and stuff. And he was late for an appointment with this guru. And anyway, he came in and he said, "I'm sorry I'm late, but I was having these amazing experiences. I was playing with the gods. I was there. It was amazing." And this guru dude, he said to him, "Are they here now?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Well, it isn't the whole permanent truth, is it? It's a waste of time. Forget about it." And I thought that was so cool, because everybody's looking within spirituality for these experiences, that spiritual materialism. I need this new mantra, I need this new robe, I need these new beads, I've got to get a goat skin to sit on because it's perfect, because such and such a guru did it. And really for me, it was that experience in 2006, very slight shift, where I seemed to discover that ground of being, whatever it is that underpins all of this, like the canvas that all these experiences are painted on. And since then, beautiful, I have that, but I can still paint idiocy all over the place. It doesn't make you infinitely wise or anything, but it's beautiful. And so this is the thing that people seem to think, they look at a small part of your life, say you're stuck in this, you're stuck in that. They don't see that complexity of somebody who will delve into it and will question their own beliefs. And I think that's what I see in your writings too. I love that. That's what I fucking love that.
yeah, appreciate that. You just said a word I want to dig into. I'm going to write it down actually, because spiritual materialism. That's I'm going to dig into that later.
Cool. Well, it's so common, isn't it, among all of these sort of spiritual cults, religions, disciplines, when people are not getting to the foundation of it. I need to collect this. I need to collect this sort of amount of virtue. I've done this good for the poor, or I've got this amount of powers, or I've got this advanced technique in the TM movement, or I've gone up these levels in Scientology, or it's all like fucking bollocks, really.
Yeah, it is because I mean, if it's, well, I guess it is and it isn't. There's something to be said about blind faith, right? Like what I've always done or what I've been doing lately isn't working. Why don't I can just try these things. I can cling to, I guess, that spiritual materialism. That's a good.
When I say it's bollocks, I don't mean that it's. I mean that if you're pursuing all of that when you're really trying to find the foundation of who you are as the core of your being,
right.
Doing all that other stuff, cool, go for it. It's fun, but it's not going to lead you to that absolute truth. That's all,
Yeah, no, there's some in it, yeah, but it's not. If you get obsessed with the spiritual materialism or not noticing it for the way you've just described it, you're missing the point. I say this to Christians all the time. Like if when like someone says, for example, what would Jesus do? I will bring back to your attention that on at least one occasion, Jesus ran through the temple and very violently and viciously cast out money changers. So you can look at Christ's example, like the story of who he was. I believe it's important to read and study scripture. And if you get so buried in the scripture that you forget the story of this man who lived this life and loved these people and forgave these people, you're sort of missing the ball. Like we're not, as a Christian, we're not expected to be perfect, but I find it hilarious that so many people who are not Christians can challenge a Christian and say, well, that's not very Christian of you. Well, then I have to eat a little bit of my cognitive dissonance, and a little bit of that. Yep, you're right. That is not the example that was set for me. But then the thought has often occurred to me, okay, more people know and sort of understand Christianity than even want to let on, because how would you even know if I'm not being Christian if you don't know what Christ expects of me as a Christian? So you know what I'm supposed to be like. Well, okay, but if this person is not a Christian, what standard do I hold them to when they're being an ass or they're harming someone else? What measure do I hold them to? I guess in a spiritual journey, people need to sort of cling to um, the all-encompassing idea. Like, what is the point of a commandment like "Thou shalt not kill"? Very specifically, what does it mean? Life is about life. It's about perpetuating life. It's about living as long as you can. And how dare you rob that of somebody else? So when you're talking about people collecting, I guess, like sort of this spiritual, there's another word that just popped in my mind, currency. Like, how much of this do I have? Man, I think you need to more focus on improving life. Sorry, I lost my phone mount there. So something else that I thought is important, I noticed people doing, and I noticed I was guilty of at points when I really dug deep into my spiritual journey, is like, look, I'm not in this life to be a spirit or an angel. I will transcend this life when I'm dead. It's important to dig deep and be spiritual. I think, on that, back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is the highest part. But you also have to remember that here in this life, you're here in a body. You're here to experience life as a human in a body. And that would be true whether you are spiritual or even believe in a God or not. Like, this is a tremendous gift. Um, for a lot of religious people, you who have a religion, you go to church on Sunday. You may visit church sometimes during the week. You're going to read your scriptures. You're going to do some study. But I've heard it said that we're meant to be in the world, but not of the world. The key part of that statement is the part I think people are missing, is you are still meant to be in the world. It's your body. And if you're chasing after just that spiritual materialism. See, I had to glance at my little note, or I would have forgotten totally what you just said. If you're just trying to collect spiritual currency, you're forgetting that you were meant to also in this life, you're supposed to live, laugh, love. You're supposed to have experiences. I feel like if someone leaves this life and has never been fishing, they have failed. I don't know how you can get away with that.
That's brilliant. Yeah, there's an old saying, isn't there? Every day spent fishing is not counted towards one's total days, or something like that. That's beautiful.
I'm
But I see it in the in the people in the transcendental meditation movement where I kind of come from, and and I see them get at this real spaciness and this no groundedness, and you know, you can go too far into that other side, exactly, and you can waste a whole
Yeah.
life just spacing out. And then, you know,
Hmm.
you get stuck in what the guru said. Every sentence becomes Maharishi said this, or Jesus said that, or something like that. That's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
cool to refer to. And he was great. And I mean, Jesus is my favorite thing that Jesus said, or is attributed to him, was "Be still and know that I am God." I mean,
Yeah.
this one I love. I think that encapsulates the
That's
whole damn
beautiful.
thing. You know, for everybody,
Be
it's not
still.
just me.
Yeah.
I can. Everyone can do this, not just me. You know, I love that.
Right.
But
Right.
you know, and then you get caught up in all the weird things that happen around religion and stuff like that. I mean, switching gears for a bit, tell me a bit about your health journey and what happened,
Mm.
and what you faced, and how did you get out of it? Did you ever get caught up in the vegan craziness? How did you get to
Nah.
carnivory? What happened, you know?
That's a good. I'm glad you brought us back to earth here. This is a good one. I never could have been a vegan because I've also always been a lifelong hunter and fisherman. You know, I did at a doctor's insistence. They put me on a low fat, high carb diet to help my gallbladder that they were going to take away. Um, and and that really, really changed how I feel about modern medicine. I didn't want to lose my gallbladder. I did enough research to know that a lot of people who lose it, like you can live without one, but a lot of people who've lost their gallbladder have digestion issues for the rest of their lives. But it backtracks even more than that. I was a really unhealthy eater for much of my life. I ate a lot of junk and a lot of unhealthy foods, but I also ate a lot of healthy foods. I would eat anything. I was a garbage disposal. It didn't matter. Put it in front of me, I would eat it, except for peas. I hate peas, green peas. I I've written many long hate pieces about peas, and I don't understand why that's even a thing. But other than peas, honestly, I would eat anything you put in front of me. Um, I did the Atkins diet years ago after a surgery. I went from not being able to be a heavy manual laborer to being a security guard. Um, I ballooned. I couldn't exercise. Over the course of a year and a half or so, I gained a bunch of weight. I tried the Atkins diet because I was desperate to lose weight, and that's the first time I ever tried the carnivore diet because I didn't dig deep enough into it. I just realized, hey, look, um, I can just keep eating the meat because I started losing all this weight and I lost a bunch of weight. I think like 30 or 40 pounds. It was a long time ago. Well, eventually I went back to just eating my pizzas and cheeseburgers, and I didn't gain weight very fast. Like doing what for me at the time was just all meat, some cheese, just very low, very low carb. It changed my metabolism. It took a long time to gain back the weight. Uh, that was probably 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. Stepping ahead about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I'm bad at remembering years, man. It all runs together for me. But I had some injury to my hip. Don't know what caused it, but I had avascular necrosis. My hip had decayed to nothing. There was no more cartilage. Um, I became a cripple. Most days, on a good day, I could walk with a cane. Um, there were some days I couldn't walk up a step or two. Couldn't even lift the leg. The pain was extraordinary. I finally saw a doctor who finally diagnosed it correctly, told me, look, there's no way, there's nothing we can do to fix this. You need a total hip replacement. I heard that I got that news like 3 days after my 40th birthday. I guess it was 3 years ago then. Um, and for the whole fact of being so crippled, it's the same thing I went through years earlier. Apparently, didn't learn my lesson. I didn't change my diet, but there were days on end I could hardly leave the bed. Like food was one thing I could do. Um, I got up to just around 265 pounds. I was fat. Um, I got the total hip replacement, and about a year later, uh, had some tough things happen to me, but I was doing better and better with the hip. And I decided to do what at the time I thought was the Atkins diet again. I'm gonna do that again. I lost all the weight before. I can do it again. And that happened at the same time as the gallbladder thing. So I was a little reluctant. Then I started just seeing, oh, well, what you're doing when you're restricting the fat is you're shrinking your gallbladder. So I've got this stone in there. And what I've done is on the diet they recommended, cut out my fat and spicy stuff and reduce the amount of bile. Essentially, it turns out their recommendation was going to cost me my gallbladder. And it was one of those moments that I felt like I was damned if I do, damned if I don't. They're going to take the gallbladder anyway. What would it hurt? So I dug into to my earlier understanding of carnivore diet. And then I saw Jordan Peterson. I've been following him for a while and loved the guy. And when he started talking about the mental component, the reduction in depression, reduction in anxiety, that's when I went full carnivore. So the first couple of weeks I eased in it, but I was just running down that rabbit hole. Anything I could find about it, because it's kind of scary. You think everybody's telling you you're going to give yourself a heart attack, or people are saying, oh, it's okay to do that for a little while to lose weight. But I'm sorry, my logic just wasn't, okay, you're saying I could die of a heart attack, but I know what it's like to be fat and miserable. Bring me the heart attack. So I dug in. I did after those first few weeks of kind of dipping my toe in the pool, I went ahead and I did 3 months of just beef and water. I lost 70 pounds in 3 months. I think the total that I lost, it was around 270, and then I've been at 195 to 200 pounds ever since. I slacked up a little bit. I added some cheese and some eggs and other things in those following months. But during that first 5 months, that's it. I was extremely carnivore. And I think it was right at the 5 month mark. I was like, well, it might make me sick, but I'm going to sit down and eat some ice cream. And I ate a half gallon of ice cream. Everybody told me it was going to make me sick and it was going to destroy me. And it did not. Well, ever since then, I still do 95% carnivore. I allow myself now, if someone's bringing me out to a nice dinner, I'll eat a little bit of other things. And occasionally I have me an ice cream cheat day and I eat the whole half gallon. No exaggeration. Occasionally. When I was on vacation.
I think that's how we did it ancestrally. We'd find a bee's nest and we'd just eat the whole damn lot and we'd bloat out and then we wouldn't have it for a while. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is I've learned more and more to listen to my body, and it's a part of my new, this year, my theme. Last few years, I pick a new theme. Like, this is the thing I'm going to work on to be a better person. This year, my theme is better authenticity. there are people who enjoy my writings and people I've been inspiring to. Um, I want to be more authentic so that I feel more credible when, and it doesn't matter, people are going to like me or hate me. People like you and I are characters. We're going to have people who really love us, but that also means there's going to be people that can't stand us, right? But for those people who do find me interesting or fascinating, or my writing has touched them and inspired them, I think I need to be a little more authentic. So, like, I have been trying to stick with, I enjoy fasting. I know that seems to have helped me tremendously in a lot of ways. Um, uh, I do mostly meat. Then, there's a few little things. My philosophy, I stick to it, believe strongly this, that meat is for your food, your nourishment, your energy. Plants are for flavor or medicine. And then because I think all mammals are omnivores, like all mammals, if you by strict definition, there's not a carnivore out there in the mammal world that doesn't occasionally eat plants for some reason or another. By comparison, there's not an herbivore that I'm aware of that doesn't occasionally consume animal parts or animal products. So I think you've just said it. Yeah, in our history, maybe we were living out on the plains eating buffalo all the time. But if you came across a beehive, yeah, we would eat all the honey. Um, Look, that mentality is not going to work for everybody, and I get that. Like when the few opportunities I've had to coach somebody, or it's been brilliant. Like some people ask me, "How's this work for you? How did you lose so much weight?" Because the weight loss is the thing that was most noticeable for somebody. When you lose 75, 80 pounds, I don't remember exact now. I just remember somewhere in the neighborhood of 270. I don't think I ever weighed myself at my fattest. I threw my scale away. I get emotional like that sometimes. But it was about 75 pounds. Like you can look at these pictures and tell that's not the same guy. That impresses people. Well, I've learned that I can't treat it like a religion, Phil. I can't treat it like an orthodoxy. There are some people that would benefit tremendously from only red meat and water rest of their life because I don't know, genetically, or you get even in the epigenetics changes, environmental factors, like they they're not going to have the same tolerances as you or I might, that I could deviate a little bit. At the same time, if I spent the first most of the first 40 years of my life abusing my body or just eating all of the wrong garbage, well, it didn't kill me. I was unhealthy. It was bad. Well, then if once or twice a month I decide to eat some ice cream, that's probably also not going to kill me. And because I'm mostly eating what I really ought to, my body's equipped. But then I think it's important to. I get tired of those orthodoxy type carnivores just being obnoxious to people. Hey,
Those groups where you get thrown out for mentioning broccoli and stuff, man. It's not. That's not me at all. Fuck it. It's crazy. Listen, there's one thing I really want to get your take on. As a sort of lifelong hunter and fisherman, and now that you eat this way, and with that whole spiritual perspective, what the hell has happened with all these plant-based diets being associated with spirituality? How have we lost touch with just how spiritual it is to have respect enough to kill an animal, bring it down, eat it, and assimilate it how we're supposed to have done? How have we lost this, and what do you feel about this perspective of spirituality being stuck onto the plant-based diets and stuff? What's gone wrong here?
Uh, yeah, that's actually the subject matter of the book that I'm trying to write. Hopefully, it'll be written someday. Um, First, I would give a little shout out, a little respect to vegans, just a little bit though. Um, I love animals too. Okay, I treasure them, and I the I'm going to argue. I could argue the facts all day long about what we're supposed to be eating. But now, when you get down to a belief, I can respect that element of the vegan belief that they don't want to kill an animal. It pains them. I I admire that actually, but um, I think there's a more admirable way to approach diet and our relationship with animals. Um, I feel I can kind of tell I've got these different kind of conspiracy theories on why that was lost, but what it boils down to is that there's people have a lack of faith, I believe. And the reason I say it boils down to a lack of faith is because people have a fear of death or a fear that killing an animal has some sort of wrongness to it. Now, I feel it's also why I decided I'm not going to be strict zero carb um, carnivore for the rest of my life. It, if that would be helpful or beneficial at some time for cleansing, or if sometime my health gets to where it would be beneficial for then I might. But the reason I won't be just gung ho 100% avoid everything that could hurt my health is, Phil, I'm not trying to get out of this life alive. It ain't going to happen anyway. Neither is that cow or that deer or that chicken. Um, I can tell you philosophically why it matters to eat animals. Uh, we're humans, Phil. We have the sentience, the intellect, the power of mind to have a conversation like this. This conversation we're having is we're going to talk about like eating an animal. We're giving that animal we're not maybe not giving it its purpose, but we're recognizing its purpose. We're celebrating its purpose. We're giving it a tremendous value that it doesn't have just being, you know, a cow crapping in a field. Like that cow doesn't look at another cow and think, oh, this cow is fantastic. It doesn't look at me and think wonderful things. But I think, look at that cow. Man, isn't that amazing? That animal gives me life. Here's what it boils down to. That old philosophical question, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Um, I know the answer to that question. It's real easy, semantics. But it makes sound waves whether there's anybody there to hear it. If someone asks, does it make a noise? No, a noise is an unpleasant sound. If there's nobody there to hear the unpleasant sound, it doesn't make a noise. So there's your little deal in semantics. But I took that question further one time and just told myself, if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, does it even matter? Doesn't matter. I'm a human. I'm going to write a story about the tree that fell in the woods and scared the fire out of me while I was fishing. Like, well, I was too close to that tree. Now that tree, nobody even knew that tree existed. You know, I mean, but I had that experience and like the first animal I ever killed with a gun was a little bird. I didn't eat it. I felt guilty about that. I was a little kid. I was about 9 or 10. Shot a little bird with a BB gun. I felt like, with Davy Crockett being one of my heroes, loved Davy Crockett. I even owned the coonskin hat with the tail and all. Like, man, what kind of hunter am I? I just wasted this animal. But as kind of years went by, I look back on that and reflect on it. Phil, man, that was 35 years ago. I killed that little bird. And what if it had just dropped dead of a little bird heart attack and no one had ever known about it? But here's this one bird, like, so contributed to my life that here I am sharing it, the story of that bird years and years later. That's a tremendous value. I do feel bad about that little bird, but you know what he contributed to my life? He contributed a greater conscience to me. Um, every animal in the woods, I can tell you the first time I ever killed a deer. Like, well, actually, the
Jason,
first time,
Jason, just before you
yeah,
go into the deer one, I've just got to slip in there. The first, I remember I shot a little bird like that. I nicked my father's air rifle, and I went out and they put some peanuts up in a cage, you know, and the birds
yeah.
came down for them. So it was so mean to shoot it off there, but I shot it and I killed it, and I felt really really bad about it. And my dad came out and caught me, and he hit me, and
Oh,
it was the only
oh,
time my dad ever hit me. So I remember it for that as well. Sorry, carry on with the deer. Go with the deer.
it's a beautiful story. Like, dude, but the lesson learned there is, man, I need to value life more than that. Um, it kind of hurt, but also I remember picking it up and playing with it and looking at its feathers really closely and studying it, and and it was just a tiny little bird, you know, and but how fascinating and amazing that little bird was. The first time, it wasn't the first time I killed a deer. Like many times I had like hunted large game and then paid someone else to process it for me. I was intimidated to try it, had nobody to teach me. Well, thank God for YouTube, right? I decided, I am not my authentic self that I would have been that age, however old I was when I finally butchered my first large game animal, my first deer that I butchered myself. I'm this hunter and outdoorsman and survivalist, and I've paid other people to clean my deer. Oh, that's just not going to be okay. That's too much of a slight against my ego. Well, as I was cleaning this deer, I've hunted many animals. I've caught thousands of fish. I've eaten thousands of fish. I was uncomfortable, cleaning the deer. I mean, there was kind of a point in there where, I know I'm going to finish skinning and and boning out this deer. I'm going to do it, but there was a point where I wasn't enjoying it, and it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. How disrespectful is this that I'm even having these feelings? Like, how disrespectful is that this deer is giving its life? He's going to be delicious. He's going to give me life. Well, it was kind of a double checkmate because then it hit me, you know, I think I would be more upset with myself if I had no reservations about dismantling this animal. It's a beautiful animal. I actually have a pet deer right now. I found like we found it in the garden, bottle raised it. I wish he would take himself back to the wild. Like, so I love animals. Like, so this animal in that moment, like, so this is kind of another little bone I'm throwing to the vegans. No, it is a sad but inescapable reality of this life that it takes life to give life. Um, when if you stay focused on the fact that yeah, I killed this deer, that's death, but I didn't kill it for the sake of killing it. I didn't murder a deer. Murder is whether or not it's murder is 100% to deal with intent. It was my idea to kill this deer for the sake of killing it. It was to take his life to sustain my own. And that's kind of the precipice there. It's like, why are you taking the life? Now, because I'm deep and philosophical like this, when I kill an animal, even I catch a fish, I contemplate what was this animal's life like? Like, do you think to whatever degree a deer, like enjoys his life, do I think maybe he enjoyed his life? He, the sun put that energy in those plants. The deer collects that energy from that plants and processes them in a way that I can't process those plants. And then that deer lives a life. I do take his life, but he lives a life so that I can live my life. Well, the point is that the thing you have to ignore, if all you're thinking about is the death of that animal, is okay, A, he's not much different than me in the fact that he's not getting out of this life alive either. But in order for him to even be useful to me, he had to live a life. And all of the things that go into that for a deer, whatever that means, he had to live it, he had to do his thing, and then now it's my turn. He used the grass and whatever he used to sustain his life. That's life dedicated to more life. Now I take his life, it supports and sustains my life. And it's so simple. We hear it, we all heard it when we were kids. We saw it on, what was that, the Lion King. It's the circle of life. You This whole like self-righteous attitude that humans are above all that and we should be out here looking in. Really, I mean, that degree of arrogance, that's really what it is, Phil. It's arrogance. Like it says, I can transcend the circle of life. That, I mean, take your pick. If God created me, then I'm supposed to be a part of this life. If this was an accident, giant big bang, and I emerged out of some fish's butt 300,000 million years ago or whatever, okay, then I evolved as a part of this circle of life. To believe that somehow because of my philosophy that I should somehow be above that or beyond that, I just don't see. You think you're better than all of these animals? Um, I don't see that. I see every single living thing as having its unique, beautiful purpose. Um, I'm not. I certainly have power over a lot of these animals, but the humility comes in during like cleaning that deer. For me, it was a spiritual experience because it just didn't feel good ripping the skin. Like, I mean, I can identify with what's going on in a vegan's head. Oh, you're just tearing at that meat. Yeah. To actually put your hands on it and do it is a unique experience. I've done it many times since then. And every single time I reflect back on that time, but then I consider the deer. I'm so extremely grateful for, especially since the carnivore lifestyle, it gave me my life back, Phil. I mean, I was crippled, my hip was gone, I was fat, depressions and anxiety and all these problems and so much medications and dude, this treatment or that treatment. I've never given up trying to to cope with or heal a mental illness. To realize that these animals give their life to give me that health, to give me my life back. Who do you think has more? Now, you can't compare really, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Who do you think has more value for that animal? Like, knowing that I can't live without it is humbling. I have to take lives to sustain my own. But do you realize, like you bring it up all the time about look at this like industrial monocropping. These places, I see them driving all over this country. I see miles and miles, sometimes hundreds of miles of just corn or just grain. And what I don't see is a bunch of wildlife. I don't see a variety of anything. I see one thing, a whole bunch of corn. Now, if I put a bunch of cattle and I did like mob grazing and had cattle and sheep and goats and pigs, and I had them in a rotational grazing situation, but also I could allow other animals in there. Like the wildlife is not going to bother me to in these fields to share it with the livestock in a lot of cases. To me, that's now greater diversity of life, isn't it? That's more life in general. And then that becomes more beautiful to me because if I realize someday, Phil, I am going to die, and it seems like cliche, but why won't it just sink into people? You're going to die. What so many people, even animals, what you miss is not having the chance to live. And when I see a world with greater diversity of animals, that's more lives, living lives. Yeah, they're all going to die, and that sucks. But more of them get a chance to live. That's a greater diversity of animals. And then you see your humble place in the whole circle. Yeah, I'm going to die too. And while I live, I get to participate in this beautiful, I mean, damn near indescribable chain of life, where its life recycles and gives to more life. And and I think to wrap up that this little thought, this little rabbit hole, I would tell you, I think what is missing is people need more hands-on experiences where that disconnect happen is that people aren't um connected to the livestock and the wild. They're not a part of that process for how does this meat end up in the store. And you can't, I don't think you can be human, like truly human and in touch with your spirituality and not at least lament that, yeah, animals have to die to give me life. Spiritually, I think it's important to have at least some somber feeling about that. But I can tell you where I get the idea that we're just missing it is I worked in a wilderness therapy program for troubled youth and young adults for a few years. You see these kids with just horrible, horrible problems, man, like depression, anxiety, problems with crime sometimes. They're empty, they're suffering. And I know what that's like. I was rebellious. I did a bunch of dumb stuff. But you get them around a campfire, cooking their own food for scratch. They're in nature. They have to regulate every part of their life. Like if it's hot outside, I need to shed some clothing. If it's cold, I need to put some more clothing. If we want to cook our food tonight, we got to go gather some firewood. When you start getting in real touch with your more primal, more primitive instincts, a lot of the modern day clutter starts to fade. And I think everybody everybody needs the experience once in their life of, even if it's just catching a fish, killing that fish, cleaning that fish. And then the next step, most important, eating that fish. And I know people that would be so grossed out and disgusted with the guts and cleaning the fish process that they wouldn't. But then you go back to my experience with the deer. How disrespectful is it to this animal that I can't even put up with the dirtiness of taking its life, but I can eat it? That's why people are disconnected, Phil. You don't get that true sense of your place and your purpose. I think people can imagine it. People listening to this humans are very good with the vicarious learning, right? Like people could hear this and say, I get it. And there's still that next step of I wish everybody would do it themselves. Find a friend who does hunt and fish. Get them to teach you, like take yourself from the start to finish, taking an animal's life and then eating it and realizing this thing is giving me life. And in order for that to happen, more importantly than it dying, it had to live, you know. that
Jason,
disconnect, there's so much of it.
that's just spot on. I love this idea about, because I think with the vegan thing and with a lot of people, the problem is a fear of death. Like you said, and this worry about it. I just think that is the most beautiful summing up. I've got the kids downstairs. They're getting restless. Jason, I could go on for about 3 hours on this one. I
Sure.
love this.
Yeah,
We're to wind up here. We've gone over my usual sort of 1.5 hours, and it's been absolutely fascinating. I've got to say to people who are listening to this, actually, this sounds a bit woo, but at loads of times, I think the timeline's kind of bent a bit in this one. I've known exactly, even to the word, what Jason's about to say, and it's been it's absolutely cool. I'm thinking, is he going to come out with that one? Yeah, he's gone there. Some of the things that were even new to me. So it's not like we're all brainwashed with the same thing. It was beautiful, Jason. I'm blown away. Thank you so much. And listen, is there anywhere that you've got any kind of collection of your writings or anything that people can go see? Is there a Jason website or something? I've seen so much of your stuff on the Facebook thing. I just don't know.
I just do Facebook. I have collections of my writings, but I think it is time for me to start putting my stuff out there, Phil. And I will, and I appreciate you inviting me on your podcast, and I appreciate you doing this for me, because in a lot of ways I needed some boost of confidence. I feel very acknowledged that you did this for me, and I feel inspired to be more generous in sharing my works. And I need to come up with a website or a page or something that I can share more of my writings.
Yeah, I do, man. But I mean, if in future it's there, then I shall share it and put it in these notes of this, which hopefully will be up there forever. But in the meantime, if anybody wants to see Jason's amazing writing, see if you can catch him in my 100% Carnivore and Beyond group on Facebook, or the Beyond group, which is like a sort of subgroup of it. I'll leave it up to Jason whether he wants to friend you lunatics up personally. But you can see him there. Jason, thank you so much for coming on this.
Thank you, Phil. It's been truly a pleasure.
Uh-huh.
Son of a lighthouse keeper, through corns and a wishing well, prayed for a love to call.